Hi Sam.
Hi, Neil.
How you doing?
Wow, these windows are tight. We have 10 minutes? That's crazy. Okay.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Good. How are
So,
you?
oh, I'm very well, thank you. I'm really excited to chat to you about this movie. I absolutely loved seeing this book translated to the screen. Why don't you start off by telling me what excited you about taking on the Doom that came to Gotham as an adaptation?
Um, Honestly, it was like there was a video game I was playing. Right? It was called Bloodborne,
Mm.
and it's very sort of I don't know what you call it. It's kind of Victorian horror, um, and I think in general, also I just been interested in I say this, but I haven't watched a ton, but like aspects of like Japanese horror, Korean horror,
Yeah.
um, and so it kind of got me into this thing, and I remember having a conversation with Bruce when I was finishing up, my run, on the DTVs, with Bruce and James Tucker, how it would be great if there was like a, sort of like a horror story. And so he was I wasn't aware of the book, to be honest. And he was just like, hey, have you read, Batman the Doom that came in Gotham? And so I was like, no. And so, yeah, and that's just kind of how it started. I mean, I'm not saying I'm the biggest fan, but there's elements of horror as far as like the storytelling, which have always intrigued me, and the whole thing of like integrating. I was kind of an emo kid when I was younger, and so the whole thing of like gothic horror is
Yeah.
always interested, because there's like a human element. There's always like to me anyways, the things that I liked was the human element, the sort of like I don't know. There's like a psychological, but also I think the best sort of horror, like the Frankenstein and stuff like that. It's like a reflection on society in a way, or how things. I mean, if like say Frankenstein, if Frankenstein was just, to me anyways, it was always just about people that don't fit into society. They're like the monster. If you were somebody that has potentially even like a good heart or whatever, but you're viewed as something and you're ostracized and all that kind of stuff. Those elements, anyways, underneath all of it, have things that always intrigued me. So psychological, I guess, horror was just something that was like really interested in, and sort of how it tests you. I don't know. That was long-winded. I don't even know if I answered the question.
You've had the opportunity to work on so many amazing DC projects over the years. Is it also somewhat kind of refreshing to break from that traditional continuity and get to present these characters with that kind of horror psychological aspect and do something that maybe members of the audience who haven't read the book are completely not expecting to see?
Yeah, and I know it's very different. I've had this discussion with like coworkers and things like that. It's like we've told so many superhero stories, let alone Batman stories, right? That I mean, fans may not like it because I understand fandom is like you became fans of things because of a very specific time or a story or a movie, and you want that to sort of always continue, right? It's like music to me, right? It's like you have a favorite band and you like them because of either a song or a certain album, and you just kind of wish that they could just do iterations of that same album over and over. But I don't think that that's exactly actually what they want. But as a creator, I kind of feel like, and maybe I'm not speaking for everybody, obviously, but I kind of feel like you get kind of tired of sort of a certain formula.
Yeah.
That I always like doing something different and new, and this one was very, very challenging. I kind of almost went. I feel there's times I felt like I was over my head, and we did so much on this. I mean, just visually, because I was just like, wow, there's so many things that aren't reading, but it needs these effects that are on it. Do you know what I mean? It needs to feel more spectacular, and there's way more that I wish we had time to do. But yeah, it was definitely challenging, and I think that's kind of makes it interesting. But it also kind of gave me PTSD by the end of it. So.
I mean, when you do go back to that original book, you have the stunning cover art by Mike Mignola himself, but then that interior art, it's Troy Nixie, I think, Dennis Jank, and then Dave Stewart who did the colours. It's not. You look at that book and you don't necessarily think this is the kind of visual style that will translate into animation. So how did you approach the visual style for the film?
Yeah, because part of it is, especially in kind of the, I don't know, the specific part of the business that we're in, right? Because for the most part, we're like more like TV animation, right? So they're partially it's creative and partially it's sort of like what assets do we have, how much time do we have, how much money do we have, and how do we sort of maximize things, right? So part of I feel like the decision making is kind of like what is going to make this potentially doable, right? And we have to quantify the style, right? Because if it's people's styles that are way too organic, because it's not just like one person animates it like a comic, right? Like one person draws it and that's going to be consistent, right? There are like, tens, like, and I don't think it's 100, but there's a lot of people that have to actually draw it, right? And they don't all draw the same, obviously, right? And some of them are more skilled than others. So I think part of it is trying to figure out something that's replicatable. Is that the right word? And so Chris Samney is somebody that basically I've always loved his work, and I think in the back of my mind, because there's no way we were going to replicate Troy Nixey's work, right? I always just thought like, hey, if we could get like a Johnny Quest kind of look style or whatever, I would be happy with it, like an Alex Toth type thing,
Yeah.
It feels a little bit retro and stuff like that. And I think like Chris Samney's work, really reflected that. So we were trying to, we used him as a springboard. He did a lot of sort of pre-production designs for us, and we tried to replicate it as best we could. But again, it always sort of, defaults down to something, right? Just because it passes through so many hands.
And then with these kinds of adaptations from actual kind of comic storylines as well, there are always things that end up changing just to help make the story translate and play well on screen. And I think one of those kind of major changes here is introducing the character of Kai Li, that's played by Tati Gabrielle. Can you talk a bit about the decision to bring in this new character and switch out the role that was originally Tim Drake in the source material?
This is going to be potentially tricky because this is going to offend some people, right? But when Jim Krieg and I, we first sort of sat down and we started looking at the book, right? We were just like, wow, it's majority of the cast, like 95% of it is, I was going to say 100, but I don't even know if it's 100, is basically like white males.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And we're just kind of like, and so we're just like, we should at least try to mix this up a little bit. So we thought about basically, and again, like, I'm somebody also that's, a fan of things and stuff like that. And I don't like sort of changes too much, right? Unless they make sense. And so to me, the whole thing of like Bruce going abroad for 20 years, and that's where his training goes, right? Because Alfred takes Bruce, as soon as his parents die, Alfred takes Bruce and he leaves Gotham and is away for 20 years and is basically going through around the world, and that's where he picks up all his things, right? His physical skills, his detectiving skills, his, the mystic kind of knowledge. It's because he's been around the world, right? And so to me, the quote unquote Robins would be picked up around the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
So things like that kind of made sense to me. So it's just like, speaking with Jace and stuff like that, we were just kind of playing around with kind of things like, I don't know if it's Jace that sort of had, Sanjay be from India, but so that was like I thought like a pretty brilliant kind of thing, being able to sort of, use his name and sort of make it Indian and stuff like that. But we did want, I don't know, I've always been a fan of like, Cassandra Cain. So I know she's had like very different names and stuff like that. So I was just like, since it is an Elseworld kind of thing, and it is sort of the Bat family, like, she is at one point anyway, she was Batgirl, and so I just thought like, hey, that would work.
I noticed as well. When I was researching, I saw there was quite a few fans online who are theorizing that it is a version of Cassandra Cain as well.
Yeah, she was kind of a mix of, at first, I think it's primarily Cassandra Cain. I think just the other part, because we were thinking of like, shoot, I can't remember. Anyways, the Robin from The Dark Knight, Frank Miller's The Dark Knight. What was her name again?
Carrie Kelly.
Carrie Kelly, yeah. So Kai Li was we were trying to make a Chinese version of Carrie. So it was supposed to be a cross between Carrie Kelly and Cassandra Cain, but it's mostly Cassandra.
Yeah. Well, as you were saying, I think it feels very organic to the story itself. So I really think you achieved what you were saying there in terms of making it feel natural, and it fits with the story and what Bruce is doing. That is it for my time. So thank you so much for chatting to me about this film. I can't wait for people to see it. I think people are really going to love what you've done with this. So congratulations and thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching, Super Friends. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button just down below and hit the bell so that you can get notified whenever we release brand new videos. In fact, there's 2 more waiting for you to watch right here below. So what are you waiting for? Why not click play?